in order. And we will go ahead and get started with our agenda. Dr. Hooker, would you like to do roll call?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Heidi Hensley, Ms. Mary P. Bagby.
Here.
Ms. Linda Davis,
Here.
Dr. Patricia Yeager, Mr. Tim Denson,
Here.
Dr. Mumby Anderson,
Here.
Dr. Lakeisha Gant,
Here.
Ms. Nicole Hull, and Mr. Mark Evans.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum and we can proceed with the agenda as presented. So we will move now to item 3 to approve the agenda. Need a motion?
May I have an agenda, please?
Would you like to?
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second?
All right, motion made by Mr. Denson, seconded by Ms. Davis. All in favor, raise your hand high and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, I believe that, well, that motion passes. Ms. Bagby, do you have a vote for passing the agenda? Okay, so we have a no vote. No vote. One no vote. All right, we will move on to item 5, item 4. Mr. Greiner, I'm sorry, I almost missed you there. HB581 presentation, Mr. Chris Greiner, our CFO.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Good evening. I'm going to try to figure out where to put the bottle of water. Stick it right there. All right. And make sure I got this working. All right. So we have our third public hearing is required with the intent to opt out of House Bill 581 as required by the law with the law inside House Bill 581. So just kind of want to touch couple additions. This is kind of an ever-evolving situation, so we'll kind of go through some stuff that was mentioned at the last public hearing and then just kind of touch on a couple additional slides that I added this time. So just a reminder, House Bill 581 was passed on November 5th, became law on January 1st. House Bill 581, the base establishes a statewide floating homestead exemption that limits the annual increase in property tax assessments on homesteaded properties, which is the primary residence of a homeowner by definition, to the inflation rate of the previous year. Again, we've used this just as an example. If a home increases in 5%, but the inflation rate is 2%, the home would stay at 2%. I actually have an example in here. I think Mr. Evans asked how that would be calculated, so I put that in there this time so we can kind of talk through that. The effect here in Athens-Clarke County is limited somewhat by, we have an exemption SC. So at the age of 65, homeowners in Clarke County may apply for, this is a school tax only exemption that freezes the assessed value of their property. So thus, House Bill 581 does not apply to this group of homeowners. So that cuts in half about the number of homesteaded properties here in Athens-Clarke County that are affected by House Bill 581. The only thing that would affect exemption SC, that exemption would be if the millage rate changes up or down. That way, the millage rate would be calculated on the value that's frozen. All other existing exemptions currently would remain the same. Up until as the law is written, school systems have one opportunity to opt out. There is a House Bill 92 that is currently in the Rules Committee, so it hasn't made it to the floor of the House or the floor of the Senate or through the committees or to the governor, that would extend additional opportunities to opt out, and that would go through 2029. As GSBA and their Georgia School Boards Association pointed out, currently House Bill 581 is still the law at this time, though, so that is what we have to follow by. The opt-out date is still March 1st, and as of now, there's still one opportunity to opt out. Property taxes roughly account for about 57% of our general fund revenue. 1 mil was equivalent of about $7.2 million for the FY25 budget. So I added one line on this slide. Some guidance from the State Revenue Commissioner came out within the last week that the proposed is not to use an inflation rate at all for 2025 and then start that in 2026. So what impact does that have on us? We went from about $1 million to about a $2 million loss in revenue. Again, that's was kind of news to us, but I think they're going to establish 25 as a base year, so the value of property would remain. If you stay in House Bill 581, the value of property would be frozen for that first year, so there would be no inflationary increase. It did also set the consumer price index, and it goes into a little bit more detail, as the inflationary index that will be used going forward. So that's the only addition to this slide. I used an 8% tax digest increase. Again, we don't know that number until about the middle of April. Last year it was 9.63%, so I'm just using 8% right now, just kind of based on some history. This is the example I created. I did use a 3% inflationary rate in this example. 8% tax digest increase, assuming house valued 2024, and this doesn't factor in any other exemptions, it just looks at the House Bill 581. 40% of that would be 120 in 2024. So in opting out, that value would go up to 324,000, which is the 8% increase. 40% of that, 129,600 times the millage rate at 18.8 mils, results in a tax bill of 2436.48. So if you stay in House Bill 581 and you don't opt out, assuming there's a 3% inflationary increase, the value of the house would be $309,000, resulting in a tax liability of a little over $2,300. So the difference between opting out or staying in would be property taxes would be less, around $113. So I did $400,000. I think it was about $150. So I just wanted y'all to kind of see how this would work. Then let me get back to this one just for a second. Of course, in 2026, the 309, which is the inflationary assessed value, would again change by that inflation rate. So that would keep changing if you stayed in House Bill 581. We've talked about the pros of House Bill 581. It does reduce the tax burden of those who do not already qualify for exemption SC. The pros of opting out, again, we maintain local control. We talked about it at the last public hearing. We can work with our local legislators to kind of tailor our own tax policy. Forsyth County Schools is an example of that. They did that this past year, where they set the inflationary rate at a certain rate that would stay the same through 2035, allows them to budget a little bit better. So we could do that. So we would lose, this is a statewide exemption, so we'd lose that control. And then there is the potential if we lose, say, $1 million, $2 million in revenue, we would have to increase millage rates to make up that difference. That would shift the tax burden to our businesses and rental property owners, which in turn would probably filter down to our renters. Also, it would affect our exemption SC, as we mentioned earlier. Considerations as we look toward the FY26 budget, which we're kind of in the initial stages of right now, as we're having department meetings. So potential further health insurance cost increases. The governor's proposed budget has classified health insurance going up roughly about $500 per member per month next year, for a total to us of about $3.8 million increase to our expenditures. And that's all covered by local property taxes. We get no state funding for our classified employees' health insurance. Any additional future property tax legislation, like I talked about House Bill 92, there's other, there could be potential other House bills out there as well, or on the Senate side. Additional reductions in federal funding. We're kind of still trying to work through those pieces. We won't get our funding, allocations until really May, June on the federal side. And then any potential impacts of the Georgia Promise Scholarship Program. Again, it's hard to quantify that number at this time. They're still kind of working through how that program is going to work and what schools would be affected. So we're still in the initial stages of that as well. So next steps. This is the third and final hearing, as I mentioned. Next Thursday night at our board meeting, the decision would be made that if you stay in House Bill 581, there is no decision. We are in House Bill 581. If the board's intent is to opt out of 581, then a resolution would be issued at that board meeting. And that resolution, along with supporting documentation, is due to the Secretary of State by March 1st. And that board meeting is next Thursday at 7. So, and I'll be happy to answer any questions y'all might have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Griner, and thank you for that additional slide that kind of shows that sort of, I guess, in as best as you could, real-life scenario,
Right.
if you will, to give people, myself included, a perspective of what that tax bill change would look like.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's really appreciated. Do other board members have any questions, comments? Okay, it looks like they're,
I have.
okay, Mr. Evans?
All right, so I'm going back to your slide.
Yes, sir.
So,
I hope I got it right.
no, you did, you did. The math's great, thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so the question here is, it's 112.80, that's the difference between opting out and opting in with a millage rate at 18.8, right?
Yes, sir. That is correct. So if your house was valued at $300,000 in 2024, you would, if we stay in House Bill 581, it would save the taxpayer roughly $113 next year. If we opt out, then, the taxes would go up to, the 2436.48. So,
Yeah,
the difference between the 8% and the 3%, I'm sorry. So it's really just looking at that 5% difference in this example.
okay.
Keep in mind, if the revenue commissioner decides to set that at 0, it does affect that number. I think it was a little over $200 in that case for the base year. So, because that $300,000 would be frozen the first year, there would be no increase. So,
Thank you, Chris. I really do appreciate this, because this has helped me make up my mind.
does that
about
help?
stuff.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Yes, sir.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Mr. Denson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for Mr. Griner, if you can just, I would love to be able to look at that guidance from the Revenue Secretary, if you could email that out to all of us, so
Yes,
I
sir.
can. Thank you so much.
I'll be glad to. Yeah, as soon as I get back out there, I'll send it. Yeah, they were discussing the proposed rule last Friday, and I tried today to figure out where that ended up. But then that guidance, it does talk about the 0. I think the rule itself passed. I'm still trying to get some clarity on, is it a 0% inflationary rate for that base year? So, and I'll definitely try to get that information as well. So.
Other questions, comments? Okay. I just have one.
Yes, ma'am.
So let's just assume that House Bill 92 were to go through House and Senate and be passed. Does this then allow districts another opportunity down the line between now and 2029 to make alternative decisions other than what they currently have made, or to make new decisions at some point in the future? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I printed the bill out today, and I'll be glad to email that to you as well. It basically, the way I read it, if you elect to stay in this year, then you'd have another opportunity to opt out next year. You would have that same opportunity until 2029. Mm-hmm. So you could I think the legislator who proposed it basically said city, county, municipalities is really who he addressed, but also school district boards as well. New board members are just now getting this information. How do you make a decision that quick? I think that's kind of the basis. It's the same person who introduced extending the opt-out date from March 1st to May 1st, but now they've even quantified it further. Let's move it out 5 years, where we take the one-time opportunity to opt out away, and then you can make that decision over the next 5 years. Mm-hmm. So you could make that decision. You could stay in. Again, we really don't know what the chances of that moving forward are. I mean, it passed through the first stage quickly, but then it's got to go to the Rules Committee, and then it's. So I will say, how does that impact our process? I know 2 districts have already that I know of in our surrounding area have already fully completed this process. They filed their paperwork with the Secretary of State. So my question then becomes, I mean, I'm assuming at that point you've opted out. So I don't know how House Bill 92 would even affect those districts at all, because they've already made their decision. So it's hard. When you have that ever-evolving situation, it's hard. So.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for that clarity.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Barring any other questions or comments, we will move forward with our agenda item number 5 for public comment. And I'm going to read our policy BCBI before we get started with our public comments. And just as a notice, if you did not have an opportunity to sign in Just sit tight, and when we get to the end of the list of individuals who did sign in, we will entertain having comments from those who did not have an opportunity to sign in. All right, according to policy BCBI, each individual speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak, and at this point, remarks must be concluded. No speaker will indulge in personal attacks, and all comments are to be addressed directly to the Board of Education. To protect the privacy of students, speakers shall refrain from identifying specific students by name. No individual group shall be retaliated against in any manner for speaking during public comment. Personal concerns may be addressed in writing to the superintendent and the president of the Board of Education. Written copies of comments may also be provided to the board. At a board meeting, board members will not respond to questions or comments from the public. The district may respond to public input as needed or appropriately within 10 working days. And the use of obscene, profane, vulgar, physically threatening, or abusive remarks will not be allowed. Loud and boisterous conduct or comments by speakers or members of the audience are also not allowed. Okay, so we will get started working down this list. First up is Charlene Brickman.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Dr. Charlene Woodham Brickman, or as the students call me, Dr. B. I'm speaking in favor of this opt-out. I'm a career educator who has taught in both private and public schools in several states. I'm an ACC resident. Currently, I am a small business owner in ACC. My business focuses on educational consulting and tutoring, but I'm also a part-time employee of CCSD. As the part-time science and social studies instructional coach, I have the privilege of supporting a relatively new faculty in making science and social studies hands-on and engaging. Why this focus? Because the research demonstrates that all children learn best this way, but for children in poverty, it becomes the magic elixir needed to fill gaps due to the lack of experiences and opportunities. Tell me the textbook that changed your life. Tell me the teacher that changed your life. The best curriculum in the world will not cure our students. Education occurs from teacher to student. Therefore, we must hire and retain the best. As our district focuses on the probability of workforce reduction for the following year, I'm alarmed. Does throwing money at a problem solve it? No, of course not. But will protected staffing ratios, maintaining instructional coaching positions, and maintaining behavior specialists? It can most certainly. The faculty and staff of CCSD work exceedingly hard daily to serve our children. Now I'm asking the community to rise up and do the same. I would venture to say that Mr. Griner's example of $113 to $150 annually for a $300,000 to $400,000 house is doable for most, if not all, in this room. In closing, with the uncertainty of the fate of the U.S. Department of Education, I'm alarmed. This is not a drill. Please, please protect and prioritize our children. Thank you.
And next we have Polly Erickson.
Hello, I'm Polly Erickson. I live in Athens. I appreciate that this is a public hearing, but how helpful is it if we really can't ask questions? It seems like a pretty simple proposition, but it's gotten muddled. So without questions answered, I don't believe residents have gotten clarification yet. Regarding Mr. Griner's slide, his example said the tax increase is only $112, but that's for 1 year, and it would continually go up from there each year, most likely. This is a school district tax, yet when I called the tax and assessor's office, they said that overall taxes could be affected, not just the school district tax line. Yet neither could explain how the other taxes would be affected. If our own tax offices don't know, how can the public be expected to understand? They said they didn't know how it would work yet. My understanding is that opting out would allow the board to raise taxes based on property values of resident homeowners, whatever percentage they deem necessary each year. The current HB581 bill already does that up to the rate of inflation. So why is it so necessary to go above that? The board states there would be likely several teacher cutbacks if it was limited to inflation rate only. Perhaps more carefully scrutinized funds would be a solution. Maybe not spending so much on new college campus like primary and middle school education schools, or exorbitant rent for the oversized superintendent and employees building. And the superintendent's salary is about 4 times that of a teacher, so perhaps some reappropriation could be made. The opt-out proposal I've read states current exemptions wouldn't be affected. It was stated a current homestead exemption would not be changed. Same for seniors. If that is the case, that's good, but with the school tax rate increase every year, if we opt out, it kind of negates that exemption. Let me say, I was lucky enough to go to good schools with excellent teachers, and that ultimately helped me become a Georgia alumna. I understand the value of primary and secondary education, and I believe that every child in the county should be accessible to it. I'm willing to pay my fair share, but I think internal auditing needs to be looked at before just automatically raising taxes for whatever a school board deems necessary. Therefore, I am against opting out. Thank you.
Next up is Ramsey Nix.
Hi, my name is Ramsey Nix, and my kids attend Clark County schools, and they're having a fantastic experience. Thank you all so much for your service and for guiding them along their academic journey. So I'm here today to apologize because I'm one of the 62% of Clark County residents who voted in favor of House Bill 581. Had I known this vaguely worded amendment to our state constitution could gut the budget of my local school district, I would have voted against it. $10 a month back on my tax bill isn't worth that. So I apologize for not fully understanding the ramifications of this amendment back when I voted in November. I didn't realize it could mean $2 million less per year. That's money that CCSD should be spending to retain amazing teachers, provide high-quality instruction, and ensure safe and supportive schools for our kids. I was relieved to hear that the language in this new amendment makes it possible for schools to opt out. Clark County School District is one of 86 school districts that would rather opt out of House Bill 581. That's because communities in both red and blue counties don't want folks in Atlanta deciding what is best for our local schools. The mark of a truly great place to live is a strong public school system, a district that strives to educate all children to become citizens capable of contributing to this wonderful community. Please remember this when you proudly vote to opt out of House Bill 581.
Linda Krotke.
Good evening. I'm Linda Krotke. I live in Athens, and this is the third time I have come to speak. So I'm sure you might be thinking, what else different can she say? Well, I don't have a whole lot new, but I did want everyone to hear me since several people were out last time. I do see more faces this time, however. Unfortunately, we still have 3 people not in attendance, not listening. I thought maybe the flu had gone rampant, as it had in my family. But I do not want you to opt out of 581. And before I say another word, because people like to say if you don't want to opt out, you're not in support of schools. I am a retired educator. And when I retired, I then went into volunteering in the schools. I volunteered in Gwinnett County, Barrow County, Clark County, and Jackson County. So I am an advocate for good schools and good teachers. And I think money well spent in the education arena is the best money. However, are we spending that money the best that we can? Since 2001, when they implemented the No Child Left Behind Act. No child was supposed to be left behind, but unfortunately in Clark County, 75% of the children are being left behind, as 25% are not proficient in math or reading. So, I'm really more speaking for others I know than for myself tonight, since I am retired and have time. I'm really speaking for those young families with children who are busy with daily life and have little to no time for local politics. These young families expect their government to do right by them. These same families are struggling to put food on the table for their children and are having to cut back on all expenses. Inflation has hit hard. According to your published information, the value of their houses went up by nearly 19% in 2022, over 19% in 2023, and almost 10% in 2024. That is close to a 48% increase in the tax they must pay, the same increase you get as revenue. And this is money already they've had to pay and are still paying because those rates are still that high. Your revenue was $21.3 million in 2022 and is currently $30.1 million. How much more money do you need? When is enough enough? Our legislators understood the struggles of homeowners and the crippling inflated property tax increases that have adversely affected them. Therefore, they created House Bill 581 as a way to prevent such astronomical increases in the future. Unfortunately, taxpayers are still paying the taxes on the inflated assessment of the past 3 years and will continue to do so. So therefore, the $112, $113, no, we've been paying way inflated for years past, and we are still paying that. So that doesn't muster anyway. But anyway, the people need House Bill 581, and the people voted for it.
Ma'am.
Please do the right thing for the many who have entrusted you to do so. Do not opt out of House Bill 581.
Next up, we've got Terry Wingfield.
Thank you and good evening. When I retired to Athens 10 years ago, the last place I thought I'd ever be is a school board district meeting. But I'm here really to just talk about one fundamental thing, and it won't take but a second. 63% of the voters in this county passed this bill to exempt, to pass this bill, and then now we've got a group of elected officials who seem to not be paying any attention to the election, to the electors. So my issue is just one of fundamental, should elected officials be listening to the voters? And I think they should.
Next up, we have Aaron Jocelyn.
Good evening. My name is Aaron Jocelyn. I live here in Athens, Clark County. I want to urge the board to opt out of HB 581. Last time I spoke about taxes being a reflection of our morals, and my morality values educating the young and providing them with a safe place to be. Our society has decided that property taxes are the way to fund public education. But today, I would like to talk about the ethics of taxes. Many people speaking in favor of HB 581 now oppose paying for public education after having others pay for public education before them. This is the ethical equivalent of pulling the ladder up after you have used it to climb up. Or as the kids these days say, it's the ethics of, I got mine, now bleep you. Some have spoken about respecting the will of your constituents, and 62% of Athens, Clark County voters passing or voting in favor of HB 581. As Ramsey spoke about earlier, she was confused about the language. I too have spoken to several graduate degree holding constituents of Athens, Clark County who said that they could not decipher the opaque, intentionally obfuscating language of the amendment. It is not a clear mandate from voters when many voters didn't know what the amendment meant. The forces of anti-public education are active in many states, including Georgia, seeking to strip funding from schools to then declare, look at those failing schools, we shouldn't pay for them. Poorly worded, intentionally confusing ballot initiatives are a common method to initiate the dismantling of one of America's great innovations, public education to produce an educated general public. Finally, I would like to speak for one constituency who did not get to vote on the legislation, the ones who are actively, directly impacted, schools' students. Did they get asked if they wanted to have their after-school programs be gutted? After all, we know that idle hands are the devil's plaything, so cutting these programs will lead to greater delinquency and crime. Did they get asked if they wanted their AP classes to get cut due to a lack of funding? Fewer AP classes mean fewer top colleges willing to take them. Did they get asked if they wanted technical and mechanical trade skills classes to get cut? Losses of these classes will mean fewer young people with the skills necessary for meaningful careers. Make no mistake, denying opportunities to others that all of us in this room took advantage of to get where we are today, including careers that afforded some of us to be wealthy enough to be homeowners to pay taxes on, is unethical and immoral. Thank you.
I'm very sorry if I messed this up. Sarah Rappensberg?
Good evening. My name's Sarah Rupersberg. It's okay. Thank you all for your service. I am a parent of 3 children at Berks Elementary School. I'm also a member of our local school governance team. I want to say first and foremost that everyone's concerns about rising property taxes in Athens are real and valid, and we do need to find solutions, but I don't think we need to do it at the expense of our schools and our children. Many school boards across the state of Georgia are opting out of this House bill because they have done the math and the research, and they've come to the conclusion that their public schools will experience a significant and a substantial loss in revenue. Translate that into tangible actions, and it means we'll lose the ability to pay our teachers a reasonable wage and to keep our schools safe. Expenses do not always increase with the rate of inflation. For example, if the cost of health insurance skyrockets as it has been, but inflation only increases a little, how will we be, as a school district, be able to pay health insurance for our teachers, hardworking people who are also impacted by this bill? Opting out will simply keep things the way they are and give us the control we need to make local decisions about what is right and good for our school system. There is so much to be said for how much stability and growth we've experienced in the past few years with Dr. Hooker's leadership. We need to continue this trajectory and ensure we have the resources to keep building on the good work and the foundation that he's laid for us and all of you on the school board have laid for us. Most of the state voted in favor of the local, of making this a local decision, an option to make it a local decision. So I think that's something that to be considered. And finally, the bottom line for me is that the financial ramifications of staying in forecast serious problems for CCSD to continue this good work of growing our students, our most valuable resource. I happened to be in a meeting with Dr. Hooker last night, who reminded all of us that our why is our children, and opting out is the best choice we have to ensure that we continue to prioritize our most valuable resource. Thank you.
And I'm so sorry, I just could not read the cursive. I think I didn't, okay. All right, up next we have Halo Smart.
Good evening, everybody. I'm here tonight as a veteran educator with many years of experience in public schools and a mom of 2 CCSD school children. I'm here to caution against legislation that limits or effectively freezes funding for schools and transfers local control to the state control. I spent most of my career as an educator in California public schools. California passed similar legislation in 1978. At that time, like here, property values were spiking, and there were difficulties for folks keeping up with those taxes. But at that time, they passed legislation that was not well thought out and carefully vetted, similar to this legislation. The effect was devastating for California public schools. California went from nearly in the top 5 for public education funding and results, plummeted to the bottom to 47th for both public education funding and results. I worked in schools where I had class sizes of 40 frequently. I had no school nurse in my building. We had 1 school nurse for 4 schools. We had no school psychologists. We had no school social workers. This was the case for both the schools where I worked in Silicon Valley, one of the most wealthy districts in the state, and where my own children went, a more middle-class district. When I arrived here in Clark County 7 years ago, I was stunned by the beautiful buildings that our schools have, the one-to-one laptops that we had fought for in CCS, in Sequoia Union High School District, where I worked for years and did not obtain. And I just want to caution us to steer away from and opt out of this legislation that is clearly not well thought through, and learn from the mistakes made in California. They have been suffering the consequences of this legislation for the last 40 years, and their schools are near bottom with both results and funding. We do not want to do this to our students here in Clark County. Let's be wise and learn from the mistakes of others.
Next up, we have Joan Roden.
This is for the children and the parents who love them. I don't have a doctorate, but I understood the amendment. Universal school choice is looking better by the minute. This is for the children. I have questions, and I request you respond in writing within the 10 days that are allotted. What are the most current statistics for reading competency for CCSD students K through 3? What are the most recent statistics for reading competency for CCSD students grades 4 through 7? How long was whole language and balanced literacy used in CCSD schools before phonics was discovered to be superior? Whole language and balanced literacy were dominant in American schools for several decades before phonics was widely recognized as the superior method based on scientific research. Here's a brief timeline of their rise, dominance, and decline. I won't read the timeline, but I'll get to this. Whole language dominated U.S. education for about 20 to 30 years, 1970 through 1990, before phonics was proven to be superior. 20 to 30 years in public education. That was the smart people that did that. Balanced literacy extended whole language's influence for another 20 years, 2000 to the 2020s, but it was still not as effective as systematic phonics. It took over 50 years for American schools to widely recognize phonics as the best method, but many districts are still transitioning away from older approaches. Today, explicit phonics instruction is considered the gold standard for teaching reading, though some schools are still shifting away from outdated methods. And I've said this again and again and again. The public education system has failed the children and the taxpayers are saying to this board, no more money for 50 more years of experimenting on our children. The money that is being spent for things that are not as important as reading literacy
are taking away from what is going to make those children successful in the days to come. They have opportunities to play at home and also at school, and they have opportunities to eat a free lunch at school, but they are not learning to read. The taxpayers want to know why. Why should we give more money when we know we're not getting the product that we have asked for? Thank you.
Gordon Roden?
Good evening. You know, it dawned on me today, if this bill had not been passed, if this bill had not even been put in for Georgia voters to vote, what would you be talking about tonight? Where was the next pot of money going to come from if the financial statement does not measure out? You know, in our household, there's only a couple of ways. You have to cut your expenses or increase your revenue. I think that's the same thing with the Clark County Board of Education. I don't know how many of you are familiar with a man named Charlie Trippey. Remember Charlie Tripper that was the running back at Georgia, you know, and played pro football and everything? It's interesting to me, I looked it up today. His number was retired, of course, by Georgia. All of us, not everybody, maybe UGA, okay? But his number was 62. I thought that was ironic with the percentage of voters who voted to put this in. Thank you for your consideration and for the decision you're going to make that we'll all have to live with. It did when the CPA was talking about the difference in the housing and so on. Would that break any of us? No. Now. But what about down the road? And these are what ifs. What if this account happens and this and so on and so forth? So it's all supposition at this point in time. So I ask you to prayerfully make a wise decision for the future of our children. We all want that. Thank you.
Brian Bender?
Thank you for this opportunity to address the school board. I'm a property owner. I have been in Clark County for 30 years. I don't have any kids or grandkids in school right now, but I recognize the tremendous importance of public education to our community. I'm happy to pay my fair share of property taxes to support our schools. I don't think it's wise to restrict the district's ability to raise the funds it needs to run those schools and support our students. Therefore, I favor the district opting out of HB 581.
Okay. Angela Green?
Good evening. I'm Angela Green, and I live in Clark County. And I'm here today to ask the school board to vote to opt out of House Bill 581. I believe this bill was designed to do two things: give a large tax break to the wealthiest members of the community who live in the most expensive houses. Looking at the slide presentation that showed a difference in taxes of $113 for a modest home, you can do the math and see that this tax break would be much more significant the higher the value of the home, and it would compound significantly over time. The second thing that I think this bill was intended to do is starve the public schools in Georgia of revenue and intentionally weaken them, the end goal being to privatize K through 12 education. Since landlords and commercial property owners do not get a homestead exemption, that means that the burden of this House Bill 581, should we not opt out, will be passed along to renters. Through the landlord will get tax increases and pass those along to the renters. Since most residents of Clark County are renters and wouldn't benefit from this at all. So I support strong public schools to give opportunity to all children to make our communities stronger. I do not support public money and tax breaks to fund private schools that are unaccountable to anyone, to regulatory bodies or anyone, and often deliver worse educational outcomes than public schools. And importantly, I don't support tying the hands of the school board in their efforts to adequately fund schools and provide high-quality education. Property tax is the only tax available to school districts. The school districts didn't make that decision, it was made for them. I'm willing to pay for public education through my property taxes, even though I've never had a family member attend a public school in Clark County, and it's unlikely that I will. However, my children attended public school K through 12, and I'm glad the taxpayers and the school board of the community where they attended school had the good sense to adequately fund the school system. Clark County needs to support our schools by opting out of House Bill 581 as is permitted and written into the law. Thank you.
Eva King? Iva King?
Good evening, Dr. Hooker and board members. My name is Iva King, and I'm here to urge the board to opt out of House Bill 581. My husband and I have lived here in Athens, Clark County since 2012, but we've lived in Georgia since 1970, and I worked for many years as a Georgia public school speech-language pathologist. And the last few years before I retired, I worked for the West Georgia Regional Education Service Agency, or RESA. In those positions, as well as a volunteer positions with the Student Support Team Association of Georgia Educators, I've had the opportunity to observe a variety of school systems across the state. Public school funding in Georgia is a disgrace. Year after year, the state legislature has attempted to restructure QBE, or the supposed quality-based education system, but there has seldom been a real effort made to provide quality education across the state. Instead, each of the 59 county systems, plus the scattering of city systems, is left to fend for itself. Systems with strong tax bases can provide much better education than small counties such as Clark or the rural, poorly populated counties. However, systems with a strong tax base, too, struggle to provide quality education for all of their students. And I'm not really supposed to be here to talk about school vouchers, but I'm going to anyway. The answer to providing good education is not school vouchers for private schools. Those vouchers do not begin to pay the tuition required at most private schools. Only families that are fairly well off already can afford to send their children to private schools. And most private schools do not provide special education services for children with special needs. Consequently, public schools are challenged to provide services for special needs students, as well as meeting the needs of diminishing number of general ed students, many of whom come from unstable home situations. House Bill 521 will only make the situation worse. I think I got the number wrong on that, didn't I? Sure, we would like to pay lower taxes. All of us would, but not at the expense of educating students who we will depend upon as we grow older. Too many senior citizens say, I don't have children in school, why should I pay for public schools? Well, who do you think will be the first responders when you have an emergency? Or who will be the nurse or the nursing assistant when you are in the hospital or need to get the correct medication? We must support Clark County school system for the sake of the students and for our own futures. I appreciate all y'all do. It's a difficult job. So I really do appreciate what you do, and I feel like there are some good things happening in Clark County. I just would hate to see your taxes be limited by this bill.
Thank you.
So please opt out.
All right, up next we have Jeb Bradbury.
Well, I threw away my prepared remarks after listening to a lot of these people. It seems to me that amongst the board members and the general public that they don't understand exactly what's going on here. If I'll take Mr. Griner's slide, that if you have an 8% increase in the tax digest, that means you're going to have $10.8 million more to spend this year. What I would like to see y'all do is get the numbers from your financial director, but make him tell you the truth. Add it up. He's acting like, at the direction I assume from the superintendent, that you're going to lose $2 million, and that's just simply not the case. That means that instead of a $10.8 million increase, it's going to be a $9 million increase. And then you're going to have some state mandated teacher retirement, insurance. I get that. And you should increase your budget to that. And like I told you last week, you're going to have more than enough money to do those mandates that you're going to have to fund. And then if you keep everything, you can keep every single program you've got this year, every single one of them. You can keep every single employee. You can keep everything. Y'all are flush with money. I don't know, I mean, in your January meeting, from your November balance sheet, your fund balance has increased $3 million this year. And that's with you spending $6.5 million more than your revenue. So, I mean, none of this makes sense, but I mean, what y'all need to do, just like Dr. Anderson said before she was so rudely cut off by the attorney, y'all need to have a money discussion with your finance director. Because I don't think a lot of you understand what's going on. And I know, listening to these teachers and listening to a lot of these people saying they didn't understand what they were voting for. They didn't understand. I don't understand. We're cutting off funds. We're freezing the funds. It's just totally false. And I would just challenge you to go meet with Dr. Griner. You're not a doctor, are you? But Mr. Griner, and let's get the facts. Thank you very much.
That concludes our list of speakers who presented their names on our sheet. Do we have anyone here who came in late or did not have an opportunity to sign in? Okay. Okay. So we will take 1, 2, 3, and then that's it. I saw one hand there, and one hand there in the way back. Oh, okay.
Excuse me.
Right there? Okay. All right. So we've got those 3, and then we'll wrap it up. And if you can, give us your name so that we can put it down on the sheet.
Sure. My name is Kim Mashburn. I am a graduate of this county a long time ago. I'm a landowner in the county. I did teach school for 20 years, not in this county. I support public education, and I want what is best for all students. The voters did vote for this bill. Why vote if it makes no difference? You are currently spending $16,000 per student per year, and that's more than some private schools in the area, which have a much higher than 30% efficiency in reading and math, I might say. If you need more money, look at doing some reallocating sensibly. As a teacher, what I needed those years ago was less support staff, less administration. And I would have been happier, and I would have stayed in much longer than 20 years. Please listen to the voters and do not opt out.
Okay. We had a second person. Oh, right there. Yes. Yes. With the black top.
Alice Cobras. I'm an Athens, Clark County voter.
in Forest Heights, and I'll be fairly brief, or apologies, I'll be brief. So I actually voted yes on this too. And I noticed Ramsey Nix, I think she left, but strong second with her statements. I did a lot of volunteering before the campaign, and the night of the election, I was out with some local hopeful elected officials and volunteers. I ended up sitting next to an attorney who I'd never met before in my life. I asked him how he voted on this question and if he understood the ramifications of the vote. He said no. So, if the local candidates weren't talking about it, the volunteers didn't know about it, and a local attorney didn't understand the ramifications of his vote and did not feel confident of his vote, I don't think that 62% necessarily reflects Athens or our community. Another brief comment, I have not heard this mentioned before, and I don't quite understand why. I practiced real estate for 10 years. The quality of your public schools affects your property value. Right now, you all are at around 30 students to one teacher and about a 25% college readiness rate. That is hurting property value for everyone in this community. And long-term, it raises crime as well. So, I think everybody involved would do much better to take the better public schools and the less likely to have your car stolen and your door smashed. But hey, I'm biased. Thank you very much for listening.
And we had one last speaker. Yes. And if you could give, there was a fourth person. We'll let you do it. All right, and if you could give us your name.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. My name is Kimberly Patton, and I am a resident of Clark County. I've been a homeowner for almost 30 years, and my child, who's in high school now, has attended school here since pre-K, and he's got an excellent education. I'm also a member of the PTO at Cedar Shoals, and I would urge you to opt out. I don't want to jeopardize funding for the public schools here. My son is getting an excellent education, as are all of his classmates and the children at the other schools, and so I'd urge you to opt out. Thank you.
And our last speaker, and please give us your name.
My name is Barrett Binder, and I'm here to ask you guys to opt out of House Bill 1. As far as I understand it, right now we're sort of living in a petri dish. There's sort of two forks in this road. Either we opt in or we opt out, and we don't really know which one makes the most sense. We don't know which one makes the most financial sense or which one makes the most ethical sense. But one of these decisions will let us change our mind, and one of these decisions will not. If I understand it correctly, if we opt out now, we can just choose to assess these taxes after looking around and look at other counties if we decide that that's the right choice. In this ever-evolving situation, wouldn't the wise option be to hold our cards until we see what works? I also want to address something that I've heard a couple of times, which I've heard people asking, why don't kids in this county learn to read? I'll remind you that public schools are one of the only places that children with special needs can get served and can get their education, because fundamentally, private schools are for profit, and it is not profitable to waste time and energy teaching children with disabilities. However, obviously, we should. Finally, I want to talk about the people who are most affected by this decision. The people who are most affected by this decision are not the property owners, and they are not the teachers, and they are not really even the parents. They're the children. Our responsibility as a community, and your responsibility as a school board, is to make the decision that is best for the kids, not for us. Thank you.
All right, that concludes. Hopefully, we got everyone. Everyone spoke their piece because this is our last hearing on this issue, and I've never said the name of a legislation by number as many times as I have the last 3 meetings. So, those of us who said 521, 281, 327, we're all on the same boat. So, thank you so much. Have a wonderful night, and we're done. We have to vote to adjourn as a board.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, motion made and seconded. Those in favor of adjourning, raise your hand high, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're done. Thank you, guys.